Not more. All right, good news, bad news. The good news is I'm here to be able to do a presentation. The bad news is, unfortunately, my presentation file isn't loading correctly, maybe because I did it at a very late hour, but regardless, I'm happy to talk a little bit about Generation Z, Generation Z, and baby boomers, and talk a little bit about generational marketing and kind of a generational marketing survival guide. So it's, as I mentioned in the intro, it's probably going to come about at some point that if you're a young entrepreneur, you're going to be marketing to people that aren't in the same generation as you are. So that's fine. Don't be scared by it. But what we really need to do is run a bit of an exercise in audience, understanding your audience and learning a little bit more about your audience. So if we stop and think a little bit about developing your target audience, when we market a product here at our agency or a service at our agency, oftentimes we're talking to a whole bunch of different target audiences. There generally isn't too many products or services that we do where it's just one target audience. So if we stop and go, okay, we need to learn a little bit more about our audience to ensure we're delivering the right message on the right platform at the right time, using the correct language, etc. That's how ultimately we're going to really hit home with our audience. So there's a couple things that we should focus on. I want to talk about them. We'll call them survival tips. The first thing is know who they are. So regardless of if you're talking to Generation Z or baby boomers, Generation X, anybody in between, we need to know more about who your audience is. So this is going to be things like their age, where they live, the kind of language that they use, where they hang out online, etc. The more we can learn about our audience, the better off we're going to be. Number two, in addition to understanding who they are, we need to know what makes them tick. And what I mean by that, when I say makes them tick, we need to learn a little bit more about what resonates with them. So for example, you might be targeting a specific audience, and based on your research, you might be aware that they are really aware of price, really price conscious. So if that's the case, what makes them tick? They want to hear things about added value, about sales, about promotions. That's what's really in it for them. Now, that doesn't mean every audience is going to be looking for the same thing, but we want to make sure that we're finding out exactly what words, what phrases, what products, what services, what resonates with our audience. And if we can find those things and we work them into our message, we have a far better chance of the audience at the other end hearing it and going, oh, that's interesting. That makes a whole lot of sense. Third thing we need to know is identifying the channels that we're going to use to market. Now, if we're looking at a Gen Z, Gen Z audience, we can look at things like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, etc. If we look at the other end, a baby boomer, for example, while they might be somewhat savvy, there's a really good chance that they're not on TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram. So we need to be aware of the channels that they use to get information, that they use to get entertainment, and making sure we have the right message on the right channel at the right time. Now, a couple things I'll talk about with when it comes to channels. I think there's some misconceptions out there. For example, I hear all the time when we work with clients that Facebook is only for old people. And I don't really know what constitutes old to begin with, but I can tell you that we, as an agency, have worked with Facebook pages in the past for clients that have a very, very young audience. If the topic that's being discussed on the Facebook page resonates with a younger audience, they're going to find that and they're going to come and they're going to take in the content. Not to say every young person, every Gen Z is on Facebook, because that isn't necessarily the case. Maybe they were at one time and they've since shifted away. So don't rely on some of those rules that people have said over time about, oh, only old people do this or only young people do this. Do your research and see what really matters. Another thing I would say too, when it comes to TikTok, I think for a while when TikTok was really starting out, and if I'm not mistaken, it started as Musical.ly and then eventually became TikTok. It was an extremely young audience. If you go back and look at some of the more recent data around TikTok, it's actually starting to skew slightly older. While we still get a very young demographic on TikTok, you're starting to see that age range of 35 to 44 start to become a bigger chunk of the audience. And I think partially that has to do with the kind of content that's now being shared on TikTok. It's people from those demographics getting involved on TikTok and sharing information and sharing their daily lives and sharing tips, etc. So again, don't be totally railroaded by some of those misconceptions or those things that exist out there. Do your own research and figure out. The fourth and probably the most important rule is ask. If you don't know, ask. And what I mean by that is, if you're not a baby boomer, but based on what you're seeing, you need to market to a baby boomer audience, don't make assumptions and go, oh, I think all old people, quote unquote old people, sorry to anybody in the baby boomer generation, I think they all do this because that's what my dad does, so that's what I'm going to do. Ask questions. Go talk to your grandparents, maybe your parents, an aunt, an uncle, anybody in that older demographic that is inside of that generation. Ask them where they get their news from. What kind of things are they looking for? That's a really, really important thing to do. I'll give you a really good example. So at our agency, we build a lot of websites. And what's kind of interesting when you build a website, and for the most part, it doesn't always work out this way, but for the most part, when you're building a website, the people actually building the website and designing the website are usually pretty young, because a lot of the people that are in that field are of a younger age, because websites haven't been around since the beginning of time, and people that are in that web business generally are a little bit younger. Well, what's interesting is while they're young and they're designing it to their standards and what they think is really interesting and cool, a lot of the websites we build are actually for a much older demographic. So where the problem lies is that the young person is building a content delivery system like a website that's going to be seen by an older demographic, and you're going to get that older demographic going, I don't know how to navigate this website. I can't read this website. The website doesn't make sense. The content doesn't really resonate with me. I remember when we first started building websites at Strong Coffee, I went and talked to my dad. And my dad now is in his 70s. He would have been in his 60s at the time. And I said, hey, Dad, we're launching this new website. Can you take a look at it? And the one comment I would get back over and over and over again is, I can't read it. I don't know what it says. And I'm kind of sitting there like, well, the words are right there. I don't know why you can't read it. Well, I'm looking at it from my phone and I don't know what it says. So when I dive a little bit deeper and dig a little bit deeper, I realize the font is too small. My dad's eyesight isn't like it used to be, and he's trying to read this brand new website that we just developed from his smartphone, and he's going like this because he can't read it. And other things that I noticed too were not only are the font size too small, maybe we've overlaid a font over top of a colored background. And for somebody like him, his eyes are maybe not as good as they used to be. He's looking at that content and he's going, I can't read it because I can't distinguish enough the words from the background. They don't make sense to me. So that's some of the differences we see when it comes to generations, where the young person's building the website, the older person is the one that's actually going to be reading the website, and maybe somebody in between is supplying us the content. In our case, like a client, we need to make sure everybody's on the same page so we give the best experience. So don't be afraid to ask. Ask questions, talk to people inside of that generation, inside of that demographic that you're looking to market to. Really dive deep and understand what it is that they're looking for. And if you do that, you're going to be far better off. So let's talk a little bit about some of the traits. So when we're talking about that Gen Z audience, that's an audience that from time to time, we'll get clients approach us and they'll say, hey, Strong Coffee, we're looking to go and market to a very young audience, which is cool. We don't do as much of it. Most of our brands skew towards an older audience. But what's interesting for us is we need to do a bit of a deep dive into this generational marketing, because I only have a couple people on my team that would fall into that Gen Z 24, 25 and under category. We're all a little bit older. So we need to go and do our own research. So what are some things that we've discovered over the years when it comes to this particular audience? They're tied to their smartphones. I've got multiple Gen Zers living in my house. And I know exactly what it is to be tied to your smartphone, because they carry them around nonstop unless I'm trying to text them and then magically their phone is gone somewhere. Don't understand what that's all about. That's for a different day. But they're tied to their smartphones, and that smartphone is how they're going to get all the information, and that's how they're going to communicate with their friends. So we need to be aware of that. And if we want to put a message out to this audience, we're probably going to need to do it in a way that's mobile friendly, through an app or through a social media app, because that's generally how it's going to work for them. Besides being tied to their smartphone, they're also really into what we call bite-sized content. So a video, for example, if a video is 30 seconds long or 15 seconds long, more inclined to check that out than if we go and release a 5-minute video on something. That's why something like TikTok has done so well, because although you can make longer videos now, it's bite-sized content. You can just flip through over and over again and see these little snippets of people's lives or little messages from brands. That's what they've come to appreciate. And as a marketer, that's what we need to deliver to them to ensure that our message is being seen by them. They also look to celebrities and influencers for ideas around what's cool, what's trendy, etc. A good example of this is going back a few months when Tim Hortons made an arrangement with Justin Bieber to sell Timbiebs. So I tried Timbiebs. I thought they were pretty good. They're Timbits of different flavor. But what they were trying to do there is they were trying to get this younger audience interested in the products that they were selling by bringing in arguably one of the biggest influencers / celebrities in the world, being Justin Bieber, to tie his name to this product. And in preparation for this presentation, I actually went and looked at the Tim Hortons investor meeting slide deck. They had an investor meeting not that long ago, and the slide deck from it, what was really interesting is they talked about the success of Timbiebs, and not only the success of Timbiebs, the success of Timbiebs merchandise. And if we go back and think about that a little bit, well, where does the whole idea of merch come from? When we hear merch these days, it comes from streamers, from YouTubers that are taking that popularity that they've got on these certain channels, and they're selling their own t-shirts and their own hats and their own hoodies, etc. That's where the idea of merch came from. So it made a whole lot of sense when not only did Tim Hortons partner with Justin Bieber, they started selling merch with it, which did extremely well too. So I definitely see where they were going with that. Another example, if we had the video up, I actually showed the video a while back. I think it was last year. Burger King came out with a video, or a commercial and a video, it was online as well, that featured the Burger King, the guy in the costume, doing TikTok dances. So what was interesting when that would appear on TV is my kids would be doing something over here. At that time, they were 12 and 10, doing something over here. They would hear that song on the TV. What do? Their heads shoot around and they're watching the TV all of a sudden because they recognize that song from TikTok. And in some cases, they literally started doing the dance without actually looking at the TV because that just triggered in their heads, hey, this is what I need to do. So that idea of celebrity and influence plays a big role. Now, for a young entrepreneur, you're not going to be able to go and get Justin Bieber to promote your lawn care business. That's not going to happen. But just keep that in mind that these Gen Zers aren't necessarily loyal to brands. They're what's new and what's different and what's cool and what's trending. So just something to keep in mind there. Maybe it's a local influencer that you can work with if that's the market that you're trying to go for. Something else to consider too, social media plays such an important role in the lives of Gen Zers. So we as marketers that don't fall into that generation, we know that. And if we're going to go and promote a brand to this particular audience, we're going through social. We're not going to go and spend a whole lot of money elsewhere. I'm not going to run an ad in the newspaper, not because newspaper ads aren't effective for certain demographics. That's not where we're going to hit this audience. So again, understanding our audience, where do they get their information from, and then making a decision on where to spend money from there. Another thing that's really come about in the past few years that I think is really important if you're marketing to this particular generation, the very young generation, is while they're not necessarily loyal to brands, they tend to gravitate towards brands that are doing good things for the environment, good things on a social level. They don't have their name attached or tied to maybe some controversial things. So when we talk about the idea of cancel culture, etc., people are very in tune in this generation about what does this brand stand for? What are some things that they've done in the past, or what are some things that they're doing now? So it's really refreshing to see that this young generation going, you know what? I like your products and services, but I also like your company. I want to promote and support companies that are doing good things. I think that's very, very important. So some takeaways there. If this is the audience we were going for, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, visually appealing content, bite-sized pieces of content, trends, etc. As a marketer, that's what I'm looking for there. Now, you might be sitting there as a young entrepreneur going, yep, I know that because I'm in that generation. Perfect. So that's what you need to think about there. Where you maybe don't have as much experience, if all of a sudden you have to market to baby boomers. And it's not a scary thing to market to a generation that you're not a part of. But again, you just need to do a little bit of homework to make sure you understand exactly what it is that you're doing before you start out. So a few things with baby boomers. So when we talk about baby boomers, these are people that were born in the mid 40s right through to the mid 60s, essentially. So think of it as, maybe parents, depending on how old you are, we could get into grandparents, et cetera, too. It depends on where you're at. But we're looking at those people that were born in that 40s to 60s range that are now approaching retirement or are now retired, depending on where they're at. Maybe let's just say you've got a lawn care business, you're a young entrepreneur, you're looking to cut grass. That's a really cool thing to do. It's really good to help out in the community. Baby boomers are probably the audience that you're going for. Gen Z, not so much, because Gen Zers in general are the people that are mowing the grass for their parents. So you want to look at those baby boomers who don't necessarily want to go out and do it for themselves. So let's just sit here and think, okay, I'm a young entrepreneur, I've got this lawn care business, and now I want to market to a generation that I'm not a part of whatsoever. What are some things I need to think about? Well, oddly enough, baby boomers are somewhat tech savvy. I'm not saying all of them walk down the street with their iPhones or their Android phones, checking a bunch of different apps and taking pictures and selfies, etc. But you would be surprised when you go and look at some research, the number of baby boomers that have a smartphone, maybe have limited functionality on their smartphone. They check their emails. They obviously use it to make phone calls. They might have 1 or 2 apps or a collection of 10 apps that they use on a regular basis. But that is something that occurs. I know, speaking from experience, my own parents both have smartphones. They are on Facebook. They totally know how to text and to send videos. They're on vacation right now in Newfoundland, and they're constantly sending me videos and pictures of random things because they know how to do that, and they know that's how they can stay connected to that younger generation, their grandparent or their grandkids or their kids. So don't automatically think that if you're marketing to baby boomers that, oh, they don't know anything about technology. No, they do. They probably don't know as much about technology as you do, but you can't completely discount that. They do still look at traditional media, so things like newspapers, radio, etc. As somebody that might be having a lawn care business, you're not going to go create a radio commercial or a TV commercial because it's just not in your budget. But something you could do is go down to Staples and create a whole bunch of flyers and drop them in people's mailboxes. That would probably really resonate with that baby boomer audience because they actually do make a point of checking their mailbox to see what's in there. And if they see a flyer that talks exactly about what services you offer and an easy way to get in touch with you, that's something they're probably going to pay attention to if they're in need of lawn care services. So again, you can't completely discount the savviness, but at the same time, know that maybe we're talking about a 50-50 split technology to non-digital methods of communication. Don't underestimate their ability to shop online as well. This was interesting. I read an article recently talking about baby boomers and their abilities and their willingness to shop online. And I think a lot of it was accelerated by COVID. Because if you think at the very start of COVID for, let's call it the first 6 months, we couldn't do anything. So you know what? It kind of forced a lot of people to figure out exactly how to order something online. It gave them the confidence to put a credit card into a computer, whereas before they would be like, nope, somebody's going to steal that number if it goes into that computer. Now they're like, well, you know what? I had to do it out of necessity. I'm okay with browsing online and shopping online, or at least researching and browsing online, and then going into a store or making a phone call or an email to get a product. So the idea of having all your information for your lawn care business on a website is still a fantastic idea because people will still find you. People across all these different generations will still find you. They're into more desktop browsing than they are mobile browsing. So most times the good news is if you make a website, it should be compatible with both a mobile device and a computer. So it shouldn't be much to worry about there. And they are more loyal to brands. Now, as a lawn care provider, somebody that's just starting out their business, they might not be as loyal to a certain lawn care person they use every year. Perhaps they are. But when you think about baby boomers, it's not uncommon for them to buy the same type of car or the same type of jeans or the same type of clothes or go to the same restaurants. Nothing wrong with that. That's just how they operate. And that's just something we need to keep in mind too. When we look at Gen Z being very much what's new, what's different, what's trending, compared to baby boomers, which are maybe a little bit more, I've used this in the past, I believe in this tried and true product, I'm going to go back to it over and over again. So something that you want to consider there as well. So some takeaways: you're obviously not in the baby boomer generation. Talk to people, learn more, talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, find out exactly, hey, I've got a lawn care business. If I was to market to you, what would you want to see? And you might hear, you know what, when I get a flyer in the mail, I actually read it, I pay attention to it. And if that's something that interests me, I might want to get in touch with you. I would imagine they're probably going to talk a little bit about how they communicate with brands and companies. That idea of a phone, not just picking up your phone and texting, actually dialing the numbers and talking to somebody in a phone probably is something that resonates with them a little bit more. So my advice would be, if let's say you're handing out those flyers for your lawn care business, adding a phone number on it, and then when a phone number that you don't know phones your phone, picking it up because it might be somebody interested in your business. Again, thinking about that generation, what they do, how they communicate, and making sure that you're not making them jump through a bunch of hoops like visit our website and book online. You might lose some customers in this generation because that's not what they're accustomed to. Learn about their situation, about their problems, communicate with them. If you know their problem is, I've got a lawn, but I don't want to cut it, or I'm not able to cut it anymore, let's use some of that language and some of those points in the posts that we're putting out on Facebook or social media in general, or what we're going to put on a flyer, or what we're going to talk to somebody about when they phone us. Understand what their problems are, and you want to find solutions to their problems, and you want to explain things in a way that make a lot of sense to them. Don't underestimate their ability to shop online, as I touched on earlier. Maybe they want to do research online, but they're not willing to book a lawn care service online. Give everybody a variety of options to make sure you're being as generationally inclusive as you possibly can. Reduce hoops and barriers. Make it dead simple for somebody to do business with you. If you're not able to do that, you're going to lose customers, and that spans across generation to generation. And I would say something that we see fairly often when clients send us content as well, you need to speak in a language that resonates with your audience. So you might not be able to use technical terms or abbreviations, things that slang that maybe you use with your friends, because the generation, the baby boomers that you might be marketing your lawn care business to, they don't understand what you're talking about. So instead of making them sit there and go, I don't really know what you're talking about, can you be a little bit more clear? Let's make it crystal clear in the communications that we're putting out. So again, reviewing those rules overall as we look at generational marketing and a bit of a generational marketing survival guide. Know who your audience is, who they are, where they live, how old are they, how do they communicate, etc. Know what sources of media and channels that they use. So are they on social media? Do they prefer to get something in their mailbox? You know, another good example I can think of for YETI businesses in particular, if you're a maker and maybe you make jewelry, you know where you would probably sell a lot of jewelry if your audience are baby boomers, would probably be going to a local market. Now, you might sit there and go, you know what, I'd rather just sell everything online so I can go and hang out with my friends on Saturday afternoon. But if you put yourself in the shoes of your audience, they might think that going to the market on Saturday is a great way to spend a day or spend an afternoon. So if you want to sell to them, sure, you can have your stuff online, but go to where they are. Set up a table at a local market. If that's the audience that you're looking for, that's where you need to be. Understand what makes them tick. Think about those keywords, those problems that they have. How can you solve their problem? What things do they resonate with? Those are all really, really important as well. And finally, ask. Ask questions. Even if you're marketing to the same generation that you're in, ask your friends, like, hey guys, do you use Snapchat? And if so, how do you use it? My kids use it, but I think all my kids do with it is use it as a bit of a text message thing, and they want to get their snap score higher, so they take pictures of the floor to continually get their snap score higher. An interesting thing that they do. I'm not into it, but again, that's not my generation. So if I was going to run a Snapchat campaign for one of our clients, the first thing I would do is go and talk to my kids and go, give me the lowdown on Snapchat. I have it on my phone, but I don't use it as much. What do you use it for? What kind of content do you appreciate on it? Would this make sense if this brand did this, yay or nay? And ask some of their friends as well. Ask and get information about things that you don't know. And if you're able to follow those 4 points, I think you're going to have a better chance of marketing to different generations and to different audience groups, instead of simply going, this is what works for me, this is what I think is interesting, I think it's going to make sense for everybody else. That's not necessarily the thing, and you want to make sure you know as much about your audience as possible before doing any marketing. So thank you very much for sticking with me here while I found out my video wasn't working. Fortunately, I had my notes here, so I could just do it all over again. The only thing that you would have missed by watching my video, I had a picture of Justin Bieber that I would have showed you. He looks exactly the same as he always has. He was holding Timbits in front of him. And again, you would have seen the Burger King doing a TikTok dance. You can find it online. He does a little dance, and he's not terribly good at it, but my kids really thought it was interesting and entertaining. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop me an email or get in touch with the folks in the YETI program, Community Futures, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have as well if you're watching the recorded. So with that, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We're going to come back in just a second, and we're going to go over the final rule as well, and then we'll close things out for the day.
All right. So we have some questions.
Before we go to rule 4, I saw you writing down over on the computer there. I was like, well, maybe there's some questions. So why don't we answer those questions, then we'll go to rule 4.
Yeah. So we are lucky that we have you right here to answer these questions for us, because we had some coming in as we were listening to your presentation. So I want to say, wow, that was such an amazing presentation.
Well, thank you.
I loved the little bits you threw in about Justin Bieber and Burger King.
Again, don't have a picture of him.
I mean, it's relevant though. It's all relevant. Yeah. So awesome. I learned a lot from that. Perfect. And I know that so many other people did as well. So some of the questions that we got. So how have you witnessed marketing change in the last 10 years?
Wow, 10 years. That's a long time. So I would say in the past 10, digital is being kind of the front runner in the past 10 years. That hasn't changed a lot. There's social media channels that come and go. There's best practices that come and go. I would say that the audience has become more savvy in the past 10 or so years, partly because people are able to research and get far more information than they used to. I tell this story a lot when I present. This was outside of 10 years ago, but when the internet was really, really getting going, when we talk about like 2002, 2003, 2004, when things were really starting to take off with the internet and people were able to widely use it, I wrote a golf website. And what I would do is I worked in the golf business, and I would stand in a store all day and I would watch people hit golf clubs into a net. And what I would do is I would take the information that they would talk about, like, oh, I like this club, it feels good, or I don't like this one. I would take all that information, put it in my head, and then at night I would go and I would write on my website under an alias so no one knew it was me. And I would say, this is what my customers are saying about this golf club. So it was kind of like I was hearing things and I was like, good news, I'm going to go put that on my website. And I did this for a number of years and no one knew it was me. And the website started to really take off to the point that we were seeing millions of people around the world. And getting back to the idea of 10 years, but this is going a bit more, as more and more people use the internet and were able to research products, they were stumbling across websites like mine. And where it really hit home about this research thing for me was I was standing in the store one day and this guy came in and he's like, do you have this particular set of golf clubs? They're from Callaway. I was like, yep, they're over here. Took them over. And I was just about to go into my sales spiel of here's what they're all about, etc. And he goes, I read a review on these online last night. And I said, oh, okay. And he started reciting my review verbatim to me, not knowing that I was the guy. So I sat there for a little bit and I was like, oh, he's totally reading my reviews and he doesn't know it's me. But that's when it really hit home with me that people are out there doing research online. And in this case, he came in to make a purchase. Online shopping wasn't as big a deal back then, but the ability to do research so customers are far more informed. That's probably the biggest thing. And even in this last 10 years where they demand more, they want to know more information, they want to know it quicker. If they leave a comment on Facebook or on Instagram, they want a response now. And that's been a little bit different. And that's harder for clients and for us to maintain too, where somebody puts a question up at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Sunday. And it's like, well, I can't live by my computer. So I would say that research angle with customers being far more educated and far more informed, and that almost on demand, I need stuff right now mentality, which is tricky. It can be kind of tricky.
Absolutely. Well, wow, that golf story was a little goosebump moment.
It was
for me.
weird. Yeah, it was. I never told him either.
Wow.
He bought the set of golf clubs and I thought he just spent $2,000 on golf club because some guy on the internet said they were good and I'm some guy.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
So there you go.
Okay, I love that. Okay.
I don't write golf club reviews anymore. So if you read them now, it's not me.
All right. So kind of going off that first question is, how did you see marketing change during COVID?
Well, first of all, people were at home way more. So they were more reliant on digital methods because that's what they were used to be able to do and get the information whenever they wanted to. So that would kind of be, I saw a bigger push towards digital. And as I mentioned in the presentation too, I think there were demographics and generations of people that would have never tried to do something online, like buy something or try skip the dishes. But all of a sudden they didn't really have a choice. And they were like, well, I might as well try this because I kind of have to, or that's the only thing I can do. So I think I saw that. So I would say from what I've seen and what we've seen in Strong Coffee, I think people became way more savvy in a really short amount of time. And now we're seeing the effects of that when we're looking to market now, where we're seeing more engagement from certain generations on social media than we'd seen before, because this became part of their thing. And now they're just going to continue to use it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It kind of like forced a shift in the generations.
100%.
Yeah.
I think on the business side, in the early days of COVID, we would get a lot of emails and questions and phone calls from businesses, because as I would go pre-COVID and harp to people when I would speak saying, you probably want to have a website at some point, you probably want to be doing something online. All of a sudden it was like, you need it right now. And there were a lot of businesses that were panic saying, you know what? Our website isn't up to speed because we just haven't had to worry about it. And now all of a sudden we have no choice. So from the business side, a lot of businesses had to get in order really, really quick.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was kind of panic mode for a lot of people. And you guys were probably had people lined up at the door.
We had people lined up at the door virtually with a lot of questions and a lot of panicked emails, which was interesting too. Talking people off of, okay.
Yes, definitely. Okay, well, that kind of leads us into our second question, which you're going to be like, so is a website a worthwhile investment for Gen Zs?
Personally, I think a website is relevant for any generation and any business. Now, when we talk about websites, they don't need to be crazy fancy. And I think as Ian, who's off the side here, our project manager at Strong Coffee, can attest, we're starting to build more websites that have the functionality that you need, but not all the extra bells and whistles because you probably didn't need them to begin with. So I definitely think websites are worthwhile investments, because the one thing that a website is going to do is, if it's done well, it's going to give you a spot in Google search results. And you know what? You can bring traffic in from all these other places. Google is still the king of bringing relevant traffic to you. And if you don't have a website, it's really, really hard for people to find you. So Ian's saying something to me off the side. Oh, yeah, good point, Ian. Ian also mentioned too, and it's a very valid point as well. When you have a website, you have a place that you own to put your content. And as we've actually worked through a number of times recently with Facebook, for example, if Facebook decides, or Instagram or TikTok or anybody decides to make a change tomorrow, and you've got all your eggs in that basket, guess what? You're in trouble.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. I had an appointment booked, and it was a home-based appointment that I was going to, and Instagram froze. Instagram just didn't, it wasn't doing anything that day. And that was my only way to contact her. So I'm like, I'm not from the city. So first of all, navigating in the city for me is not always my favorite thing to do. But then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, am I at the right place? And I'm wanting to send her a message like, hey, I'm here. Do you know what I had to do? I had to knock on the door and hope that I was at the right place. And we talked about it. And she said, you know what? I should start sending out my number or my email or any other way for my clients to get a hold of me. And I'm like, yeah. Yeah, because when Instagram freezes again, we need to get a hold of people in a way that isn't Instagram. So that's
if a social media platform goes down for an afternoon, think about your own business. If, let's say, a social media channel goes down for a day, how much does that affect your business? And if the answer is 100%, you probably want to change some things up. I know during COVID, I've never had more requests to help people set up their Google business listings. People didn't even think about them. A lot of them just got set up over time, but didn't even think about them. But all of a sudden it was like that one spot on Google. If somebody Googled your business, it would show up nice and high. All of a sudden businesses were like, I got to have that because it's got my phone number. It's got my website. That's really important. So yeah, you know what, for anybody, I think a website, and whether it's even just a simple Squarespace website, a Wix website, you want to go a little bit more like a WordPress website. It doesn't need to be crazy and fancy. We've done a lot of using MailChimp. MailChimp has a website builder. You can build a 2 or 3 pager there. It's got your information on it. Somebody can find you. They contact you. It doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of money. So 100% I would have a website.
So true. Yeah, no, great point. Social media can be unpredictable, unfortunately. So, and
you know what? I mean, just look in recent times too, Elon Musk talking about buying Twitter. If your business was hinged on Twitter right now, what's that going to look like?
True. Good points. Okay. So another question we got in, what's the best way to learn about your audience if they aren't in your immediate circle? I'm assuming meaning maybe a different generation that you aren't familiar with.
There's all sorts of really good research online. So whether it's talking to like a local business advisor, somebody earlier, we were talking about economic development officers, they might have some data around who lives in your neck of the woods. We've used, for example, like the Business Link in the past. We've used all sorts of different government websites that'll have some really good insights. But you know what? If you just simply type in baby boomer audience insights, you're going to get countless blog posts and papers that just talk about this is who they are. This is what they're all about. So the research is there. I think even with the presentation, I'm just trying to encourage people. The information's out there, even if you can't talk to somebody, but know who you're talking to before you start marketing, and don't market to yourself, market to your audience.
Absolutely. So true. Okay. Love that. Okay. Our next question. So will Gen Z, do you think, ever like taking phone calls as they maybe mature, or are they always going to prefer
I don't
texting?
know. I think it's going to be a hard road to sow there. I think I'm curious to see that too, but it's how are they raised, right? And I mean, this is a question for everybody watching too, but if you don't use your phone for phone calls right now, And as you get older, businesses that are being started or now managed by people in your generation who didn't really use the phone either, in 10 years, what's it going to look like? Are people going to be using their phone to talk? I can call my 13-year-old daughter right now. If I could pull my phone up right now and call her, I don't even know if she knows how to answer it. I can text her and she'll respond back right away. But I'm curious to see that too. But I think understanding, when we talked about that phone calls, understanding that if you're marketing to baby boomers, they've used the phone for a big chunk of their life. You need to make sure that you're accessible by phone, because that's how they get in touch with people.
Absolutely, yeah. And as a Gen Z business owner myself, my advice is do not be afraid of the phone.
No, it's fine. You can talk to people. It's great.
If that can, turn into maybe 2 or 3 leads or sales for you, don't be scared of that option.
No, and it's readily available. We all have them. We might not use the phone side of a phone a whole lot, but no, you're right. And you know what? A weird number calls, but it's a local number. Pick it up. It might be your next customer.
Absolutely. Totally. Yes. All right. So one of our last questions is, what got you into marketing?
Part of it had to do with that story I told about the idea that I was doing stuff online and I could influence people's decisions. I thought that was really, really interesting. So that's kind of where I started thinking. But I went to school, didn't take marketing because I didn't like analytics and stats. So it's ironic because I do analytics and stats now. But I've always been fascinated by, if I do this, it can convince people or get people to do this. I think that's pretty cool and pretty interesting. And now that you can do so much online, that really interests me a lot, where you're using a lot of the same marketing principles that you would have taken a long time ago in school or learned wherever. But now it's more immediate. Like, what if I did this right now? What would happen? What would people do? How would they react? And I think that's kind of the most interesting thing for me, is achieving results, but understanding that if I change something or do something, it can mean changes over here. So I think that's what's really, really interesting and fun.
Absolutely. So if you're sitting here right now, whether you're live or watching the replay, and you're like, I don't know a thing about marketing and this really scares me, there are some really great resources out there. And there are people like Brian's team who can help with, getting to know a little bit more about marketing. Or maybe you hop on YouTube for a day and you watch some videos on Marketing 101.
Marketing 101. And you know what? You mentioned Memorial High earlier too. That business class pre-COVID came to our office every year and would come in for a visit. So hope to see them back.
Yes.
They need to bring me a new hoodie. I have a Memorial hoodie I wear everywhere. It's been a few years.
Absolutely. Yeah. So don't let this scare you. Just like, don't let phone calls scare you. There are some things that you can learn in time, and they're not things that might come naturally to you, but we can figure that out along the way. So I wanted to end this portion. Thank you. If I didn't say that already, we had a pizza delivery come through the door, and then the pizza went away, and we were in person live again.
But is there pizza here still?
It is still
okay,
here.
Good. Thought I missed the pizza by having to do my live.
So thank you again for pivoting. I feel like pivot should be like our word for these events. Yeah. Pivot. Yeah.
It's live, and as you mentioned off the start, it can be very unpredictable, especially when you do a live that's like 6 or 8 hours.
Absolutely.
That's what happens.
Yeah. So I want you to share your advice for a future YETI student. What's your advice on getting started with their business?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to fail. Do a little bit of research to figure out what are the problems that you can solve for somebody, but at the same time, you want to get into something that you're going to enjoy. Like, if I didn't enjoy marketing, I wouldn't still be here. I'd probably go do something else, because as we talked about earlier, you'll put in some long hours, and if you're not fully invested in something, it's going to be really hard. But don't be afraid to fail, and give something a try. And you know what? If it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. And if it does work, it might be an amazing opportunity for you. And always ask questions, talk to people. Earlier, talking about mentors and mentorships, etc. Find somebody that knows what they're doing, or they've done that. Pick their brain, ask questions. There's lots of people out there that are willing to maybe pick up the phone and have a call with you if you use the phone, and just spend a few minutes talking to you and answering your questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that.